I was rinsing my coffee mug when my phone lit up. It was Chelsea. I hesitated for a moment. Ever since she married my brother Nathan, her name on my screen had been more of a warning than a welcome. Still, I answered. Her voice was sweet, syrupy almost, but underneath it was something cold. "Isabel," she said, dragging out the syllables like they amused her. "I figured you should know. I used your college fund to buy our new house." I stopped mid-motion, my hand tightening around the mug. "You what?" I asked quietly. Chelsea laughed. "Oh, come on. You weren't actually going to use it, were you? Be real. You're in your 30s, working a stable job. That doctor thing was always just a dream. Time to grow up." Her words didn't even sting. They didn't land because I already knew. I leaned against the counter, staring at the quiet, snow-covered street outside. "How exactly did you manage that?" I asked, my voice calm, too calm, and that seemed to throw her off for half a second. "It was easy," she said. "Nathan still had access to the fund from when your grandparents first set it up, remember? All I needed was his signature. The house is gorgeous, by the way. You should come see it sometime. Oh, wait, you probably wouldn't want to. Too many reminders of what you gave up." I pictured her standing in some marble foyer, admiring her own reflection, probably wearing those painfully fake Louboutins and thinking they made her someone important. She expected me to scream, to cry, to beg her to give it back. Instead, I said, "Well, thanks for letting me know, Chelsea. I hope the foundation holds." There was a pause, followed by her voice rising just slightly. "That's it? No reaction? No breakdown? Where's the drama, Isabel?" I ended the call. The silence that followed was thick, not heavy with sadness, but with purpose. I walked into my study, opened my laptop, and pulled up an email. There it was, the confirmation I'd been waiting for. My attorney had already locked the fund 2 weeks ago, rerouting it into a secure account I'd set up under my name only. Chelsea had tried and failed, and every step of her attempt had been documented. My grandmother always said, "Don't just trust people, trust their patterns, and protect your future like it's your life." Grandma Edith wasn't just wise, she was battle-tested. She built a medical nonprofit during a time when women weren't even allowed in some hospital boards. She knew what it was like to have your dreams dismissed, and she taught me how to guard mine. I'd seen this coming the moment Chelsea walked into our family 6 months ago, glittering in designer knockoffs and promises. 2 weeks after meeting Nathan, she had him proposing in front of all of us at Sunday dinner, holding a ring that looked far more expensive than anything his paycheck could justify. By week 3, she was already sitting next to my father at the fireplace, asking softly about that education fund Isabel never used. By week 4, she had memorized the account number. She underestimated me. That was her first mistake, because I hadn't let that money sit unprotected all these years. I'd moved it strategically. I'd run audits on it annually, just like Grandma taught me. And the moment Chelsea started showing too much interest, I'd contacted Marissa, our family's old estate lawyer, now one of the top asset protection attorneys in Minnesota. "Document everything," Marissa had said. "Every call, every question, every signature. People like her don't stop until you make them." And so I did. Now I stood at my window, watching the snow fall gently across the city. Somewhere out in Edina, Chelsea was unpacking boxes in a house she thought she owned, bought with money she thought she'd stolen. She had no idea she'd just stepped into a legal minefield. Friday was the deadline the realtor had set. For days left, and Chelsea, bless her clueless heart, was about to learn just how far I'd go to defend the life my grandmother believed I deserved. It started at Thanksgiving dinner. Chelsea had only been in our lives for a few weeks, but already she was talking like she belonged. She sat at the head of the table, not Nathan, who had always carved the turkey, but Chelsea, dressed in a tight beige jumpsuit that looked more appropriate for a cocktail lounge than a family gathering. She laughed too loudly, complimented my mother's mashed potatoes with a condescending, "This is so quaint," and spent most of the meal subtly steering the conversation toward her favorite topic, money. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The way she glanced at me when Grandma Edith's name came up. The way her eyes lit up when Nathan mentioned that our grandmother had left behind something substantial for my education. But then she asked the question I'd been dreading. "So, Isabel," she said, dabbing at the corner of her lip with a napkin, "that education fund, what's happening with it these days? You ever going to use it, or are you just letting it sit there?" The table went quiet. I smiled. "I'm still planning on going back to school." Chelsea tilted her head. "Really? At your age?" My mother cleared her throat. Nathan looked uncomfortable. I didn't flinch. "Really," I said. "My age is perfect for focus." Chelsea laughed like it was a joke, but her eyes didn't smile. That night, I pulled out the old file folder labeled Trust Fund Documents. My grandmother had started the fund when I was 13, with the expressed intent that it was only to be used for medical school. She'd left me detailed instructions, which banks were trustworthy, who to call if anything felt off, where to find the passwords she'd encoded in her letters. I sat in bed until midnight, rereading her last handwritten note. "You are my wild card, Isabel. You see things before others do. You don't shout to be heard, you wait. You calculate. And when you move, it's with purpose. Use that, especially when others underestimate you." Chelsea was already showing her cards. Over the next few weeks, she became bolder. She began asking Nathan about joint accounts, insisting that married couples should share everything. I overheard her once in the hallway, speaking softly to someone on the phone. "I'll find out how much is left in it, don't worry." That same day, I called Marissa. "Something's coming," I told her. She didn't question me, just asked for copies of every financial document linked to the fund. Within 48 hours, she had flagged 2 login attempts from a device not registered under my name. One from Chelsea's IP address, the other from Nathan's office. Chelsea was trying to map the system before she made her move, so we made ours first. We moved the funds $800,000 into a trust-controlled, encrypted account that required 2-factor authentication and biometric verification. Not even Nathan could access it anymore. Then we sat back and waited. I watched Chelsea parade around at family gatherings, calling herself Mrs. Grant like it was some royal title. She bragged about how she and Nathan were shopping for a house, even though neither of them had the credit score for a mortgage that size. She started visiting open houses in Edina, telling the realtors her husband's family had it covered. It was like watching a bird build a nest out of stolen string. But I said nothing. Every time she leaned across the table and smirked at me, thinking she was winning, I thought about Grandma Edith, about how she'd taught me not to fight fire with fire. "Let them think they're clever," she'd said once. "The smarter ones never need to yell. They just turn the lock behind them and let the fools walk into the trap." Chelsea was already halfway in. Thursday morning, 7:18 a.m. My phone buzzed with a string of messages. "Chelsea, the wire didn't go through. Did you change something?" "Chelsea, Isabel, be reasonable." "Chelsea, the bank said there's an issue. You need to call them." "Chelsea, we need that money today." I took another sip of coffee, watching the snow collect in soft layers on the windowsill. I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch. Let her spiral. Let the silence answer for me. At 8:02, Nathan chimed in. His tone was softer, apologetic. "Nathan, hey I know it's a lot to ask, but you've got a great job, right? You're stable. Amanda and I, we just need this house. It's for our future. Family helps family, right? Family helps family." I stared at those words for a long time. Where was that sentiment when Grandma Edith was in hospice and I was the only one taking care of her every weekend? Where was that loyalty when I was juggling 2 jobs to save the trust fund from bad investments after the market crashed. I never asked them for help, never even hinted. I protected that fund like it was a living thing because to me it was hope. It was my second chance. It was the only part of me I hadn't sacrificed for other people's comfort. I typed out a response, then deleted it, let them figure it out on their own. Instead, I opened my email. There it was, a confirmation from the University of Minnesota Medical School. Interview scheduled. Wednesday, 10 a.m. I had already completed my prerequisite courses online over the past 4 years. Late at night, after work, after everyone else in my life had stopped believing I would ever go back. I whispered it aloud to myself, just to hear it in the air. Dr. Isabel Grant. Chelsea thought she'd shut a door. She had no idea she'd just slammed herself inside one. The best part was that she had no clue what was coming. She still believed she could pressure me, manipulate Nathan, bully her way into my future. She thought my silence was weakness. She thought I was too soft, too quiet, too polite to fight back. But that wasn't silence. That was strategy. Marissa had already compiled a full packet, timestamps of unauthorized login attempts, audio recordings of Chelsea impersonating me on calls to the bank, even a preliminary handwriting analysis proving Nathan's signature on the forged transfer request didn't match any of his known documents. All we had to do now was wait. Friday was the deadline the realtor had set. They were supposed to close on the house at noon. Chelsea was expecting a transfer of $800,000 to land in her escrow account. Instead, she'd be receiving a cease and desist letter and possibly a subpoena. I stood up and opened the blinds. Below me, the city of Minneapolis was beginning to stir, commuters trudging through snowbanks, steam rising from manhole covers, headlights glowing in the fog. Life was moving forward, and so was I. Chelsea could have left me alone. She could have respected my boundaries. She could have asked, but she didn't. She saw something I had, something valuable, something she didn't earn, and instead of building something of her own, she decided to steal mine. Now all that was left was to let her fall into the very hole she'd dug. Friday, 11:41 a.m. The sky over Edina was a flat, iron-gray sheet. Snow clung to the edges of driveways like old regrets, refusing to melt. I parked across the street from Nathan and Chelsea's new dream house and sat for a moment watching the front door. It was wide open. They were expecting money. Instead, they were getting me. Inside, the place looked like a showroom, cold, curated hollow. Marble floors, crystal light fixtures, an oversized mirror that took up half the foyer wall. Chelsea stood in front of it, checking her reflection with a shaky hand. Nathan sat on the edge of their new sectional, bouncing one leg, chewing the inside of his cheek. When they saw me, they both stood. "Isabel," Nathan said, relief flashing across his face. "Thank God. There's been a problem with the transfer." "There hasn't," I cut in. I walked past them, straight to the kitchen island, and opened my laptop. "You just never had access." Chelsea folded her arms. "What are you doing?" I turned the screen to face them and clicked open the file Marissa had labeled Attempted Fraud Grant Trust. The first page displayed 2 signature comparisons, one authentic, one doctored. Nathan squinted. "What is this?" I looked at him. "That's not your signature. That's hers." Chelsea scoffed. "You're insane." "The bank's fraud team disagrees," I said calmly. "They flagged it instantly. And they recorded a call placed from your number. Chelsea, one where you pretended to be me. VoicePrint software caught the discrepancy." She went pale. Nathan stepped forward, looking from the screen to her, then back. "Wait, what is this?" "I'll explain," she snapped. "No," I said, my voice sharper now. "You won't, because we're just getting started." I flipped to the next document, a credit report Marissa had pulled. 3 maxed-out credit cards, 2 personal loans, $18,000 in withdrawals from the Golden Palace Casino in the last 2 months. That's where the money was really going, wasn't it, Chelsea? Not to your dream house. Not to our future. Just your next bet. Chelsea's eyes darted. You had no right to look into my finances. You had no right to forge my brother's name, I snapped. You had no right to touch a single cent of what my grandmother left behind. Nathan turned to her, his voice small. Chelsea, is this true? It's not what you think, she said quickly. I had a system. I was going to win it all back. I just needed a boost. The house was part of the plan. We'd refinance later, it would cover everything. You don't understand, I was doing this for us. Nathan stared at her, like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. I opened one more file. This one a string of text messages between Chelsea and a friend named Lila. In them, she bragged about marrying into a family with money, about accessing the trust before the idiot's sister figured it out. Her words, not mine. Nathan read them in silence, his shoulders slowly curling forward. When he finally spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. Get out. Chelsea blinked. What? Get out. His voice cracked. You tried to steal from my sister. You lied to me. You forged my name. You gambled away our savings. Baby, she pleaded, stepping forward. Get out, Chelsea, he roared. She flinched. Mascara streaked down her cheeks as she grabbed her purse and stormed past me. At the door, she turned and hissed. You think this is over? I always land on my feet. I didn't reply. I just watched the door slam shut behind her. Nathan sat down heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. I'm so sorry, Iz. I should have listened when you said something felt off. I wanted to believe someone could love me that much, that quickly. I pulled an envelope from my bag and handed it to him. What's this? Contact information for a divorce lawyer, and all the documentation you'll need to protect yourself. He opened it slowly, his hands trembling. Page after page of damning evidence. His face hardened with every line. She never loved me, did she? I looked at him gently. No, but that's not your fault. She's done this before. You were just the next target. He looked up. What do we do now? I closed the laptop. Now, I said, we press charges. Nathan stared at the floor like he was trying to find solid ground beneath him, but everything had already cracked. He didn't cry. Not yet. His silence was heavier than tears. I sat beside him, letting the weight of what had just happened settle into the walls. I should have known, he whispered. No, I said quietly. She's good at this. Too good. He looked at me, eyes rimmed red. What do you mean? I opened my laptop one last time and pulled up the final document in the folder. 3 years ago, a man named Jordan Callahan filed a police report in Austin, Texas. His wife had disappeared with over $300,000 from his business accounts. Same MO, fast romance, quick marriage, sudden joint access to finances, and then gone. Her name then was Anna Wells. Nathan blinked. That's Chelsea. It was Chelsea before that, and Amanda Wilson before that. Different names, same story. Different men, same ending. I handed him a printed report. They couldn't press charges in time. She vanished before they gathered enough evidence. Changed her name, moved states, started over. Nathan covered his face. God, I let him process it in silence. The truth needed time to soak through. I'd been there before, when I found out our mother had lied to us for years about Dad's pension. That kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt. It rearranges the furniture in your soul. Suddenly, you don't trust the floor beneath your feet. She targeted you, I said, voice low. She asked about the trust fund on your second date. She told Lila, her friend, that she had found a golden goose. You weren't her husband, Nathan. You were a plan. He sat still for a moment, then nodded slowly. Press charges, he said. I'll testify. Give them everything. I reached into my bag and handed him a USB. Everything's already organized. Marissa's ready to go. But you need to protect yourself, too. There's a freeze on joint accounts, and we've flagged all recent transactions to offshore banking routes. There's still time to reverse some of it. He took the USB with both hands, as if it might fall apart. I'm sorry, Isabel, he said again, his voice shaking. I was supposed to protect you. Not this. I smiled gently. You protected me enough when we were kids. Now it's my turn. My phone buzzed. A message from Marissa. Chelsea's previous victims are ready to talk. We can move forward. I looked at Nathan. We're not the only ones. Jordan's family, another woman from Chicago, and a retired teacher in New Jersey. They all have evidence. They all want justice. His jaw tightened. Then let's give it to them. And just like that, the soft, timid man who once blindly believed in love began to disappear. In his place was someone who had seen the edge of destruction and stepped back. I stood to leave, packing my laptop as I did. You really going to medical school? He asked suddenly. I turned to him, meeting his eyes. Yes, I said. Interviews, next week. Grandma left that money for a reason. I'm not wasting it. He nodded, swallowing hard. She'd be proud of you. I smiled. She'd be proud of you, too, for finally seeing the truth. Outside, the clouds had begun to part. The snow was still thick, but sunlight broke through like a promise. Chelsea might have believed she could write the ending of this story, but what she didn't know was I'd already written the next chapter. The courthouse smelled like old paper and freshly brewed coffee. The walls echoed with footsteps and the low murmur of strangers. I stood in the hallway just outside courtroom 4B, wearing my white coat for the first time. Not for the court, but for myself. I'd just come from my medical school orientation. My ID badge still clipped to my collar. Isabel Grant, first-year student, University of Minnesota Medical School. It felt surreal, and yet entirely right. Ready? Nathan asked, appearing beside me. His suit was neat but borrowed, his face thinner but sharper. In the weeks since Chelsea walked out of that dream house, he'd become a different man, more grounded, more focused. The shadows under his eyes were still there, but they were no longer from denial. They were from resolve. I am said. We stepped into the courtroom together, and it took my breath away. There weren't just two of us. There were five. 5 victims. 5 families. All seated in the same pews. All with thick folders and tired eyes. Jordan Callahan, from Texas, sat at the front, his jaw clenched. Beside him, a retired teacher from New Jersey. Behind her, a woman who used to be a nurse, until Chelsea had drained her savings account and vanished. Each of them had a story. Each of them thought they were alone. Until now, Chelsea was brought in by 2 officers, shackled at the wrists. Gone was the curated glamour. No designer heels, no false lashes, no smug smile. Her hair was flat, her jumpsuit beige. Her eyes flicked around the courtroom and stopped when she saw the others. She hadn't expected them. She hadn't expected us. Her jaw tightened. That flicker of recognition in her eyes. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. She was already trying to pivot her story to find an angle. It was too late. The judge entered. The clerk called the case. The courtroom settled. Marissa stood to speak first. Calm, precise, relentless. She laid out the pattern. For different aliases, for stolen identities, nearly $1 million across 5 states. Bank statements. Forged documents. Voicemails. Witness testimony. When it was Nathan's turn, he walked to the stand slowly, deliberately. His voice cracked once, but he never looked away from Chelsea. She made me believe I'd found something real, he said. She made me believe we were building a future together. But really, she was just dismantling mine behind my back. The money she tried to take wasn't just cash. It was the legacy my grandmother left for my sister. It was years of sacrifice. It was a future in medicine. Chelsea didn't just steal money. She tried to steal hope. I squeezed his hand when he returned. He sat with a quiet strength I hadn't seen in years. Then it was my turn. I stood and faced the judge. My grandmother raised me to protect what matters, not with aggression, but with intelligence. She left that fund for a reason, and I guarded it because I believed in the dream she had for me. Chelsea tried to steal that, not because she needed it, but because she thought I wouldn't notice. Today isn't about revenge. It's about making sure she never gets to do this to anyone else again. The judge was silent for a moment. Then he read the verdict. Chelsea Monroe, also known as Anna Wells, Amanda Wilson, and Amy Walker, this court finds you guilty on all counts: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to defraud, and attempted grand larceny. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with restitution to be paid to all named victims. No possibility of parole. Chelsea's mask cracked. As the bailiff stepped toward her, she turned toward me, venom in her voice. You think this changes anything? You're not a doctor. You're a pathetic little accountant, playing dress-up. You'll fail. You'll break. I'll be out before you finish your first year. I met her eyes. I didn't blink. Actually, I said quietly, I start next month. And thanks to you, I've never been more sure of who I am. She laughed bitterly, but it had no teeth. They led her away, her shoulders squared like she still believed she had a final card to play. She didn't. Nathan looked at me as the room emptied. I found the ring, he said. The one I spent 3 months' salary on. It's fake, just like everything else about her. I took a deep breath. Sell it, I told him. Use the money to start over. Turn one more piece of her lies into something useful. He paused, then reached into his pocket and handed it to me. No, he said. I want you to have it. Sell it. Add it to your fund. Use it for something real. That evening, I sat at my desk in my apartment in Minneapolis, the city lights twinkling beyond the window like quiet witnesses to everything that had happened. My white coat was draped over the back of the chair. On the desk, 3 things sat side by side: the acceptance letter from medical school, the latest bank statement from my secured education fund, and the ring. It glinted under the desk lamp, gaudy and hollow. Chelsea's final illusion. A piece of glass she'd passed off as love. I picked it up, turned it slowly in my fingers, and smiled. It would go to a local scholarship foundation in Grandma's name. Let one of her lies become someone else's beginning. My phone buzzed. It was Nathan. Thank you for not giving up on me, for protecting what matters, for showing me the truth, even when I didn't want to see it. I typed back, we protect each other. Always. He'd filed for divorce the day after the verdict. The process had moved quickly. Chelsea's prior frauds had left a trail too wide to hide. With her conviction, everything she'd built on deception began to crumble. The bank froze her remaining assets. Her aliases were flagged in every national system, and the families she'd hurt were no longer alone. Justice didn't erase the damage, but it marked a beginning. The next morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my white coat. For once, I didn't see the tired accountant who'd spent a decade sacrificing, waiting, second-guessing. I saw someone ready, someone unshakable. Dr. Isabel Grant, student, survivor, and granddaughter of the woman who taught me that silence doesn't mean surrender, and that kindness doesn't mean weakness. Nathan was already waiting at the courthouse entrance. His posture straighter now, his eyes clearer. You sure you want to do this? He asked. I'm not here for her, I said. I'm here for me, and for everyone who thought their voice wouldn't matter. Inside, we weren't alone. The courtroom was packed. The other families were there, too. Chelsea sat in her orange jumpsuit, face blank now, drained of that smug superiority. But when the evidence replayed, when each voice told the same story of trust broken, of lives unraveled, her composure cracked. She wasn't special. She wasn't untouchable. And she wasn't going to do this again. The judge's final order was clear. 5 years. No early release. Restitution. Public record across all states. Her freedom ended where our stories began. As we stepped outside, the winter sun peeked through the clouds. Nathan turned to me. "So, doctor?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm on my way." He smiled. For the first time in a long time, it reached his eyes. "She'd be proud, you know. Grandma." I looked up, letting the cold wind sting my face, letting the memory of Edith Grant settle in my chest like fire. "She would," I said, "not just because I fought back, but because I didn't let her legacy die in silence. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone who tried to break you. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. And I would become it all, not in spite of Chelsea, but because of her."
The world keeps turning, and with each turn comes a new story. When one door closes, another opens, leading us into a journey entirely different. Let us set aside the echoes of the tale just past and step together into a new realm where another destiny awaits to be told. And now I invite you to listen to the second story, a path of its own, unrelated to what came before, yet filled with mysteries and surprises meant only for those willing to journey onward with me.
The note on my kitchen counter was written in my mother's tidy, unmistakable cursive. Just one sentence, nothing more. "Sorry, sweetie. We just couldn't take care of her." For a moment, I stood frozen in my scrubs, the plastic ID badge from my ER shift still hanging from my collar. The house was silent. No laughter, no music, no little footsteps running toward me. Just silence and that damn note taped to the granite. I dropped my keys and tore through the house, calling out, "Eliza? Mom? Dad?" But every room was empty. Her backpack was gone. So was her nightlight. The unicorn blanket she refused to sleep without, gone too. I tried calling my parents. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. That's when my phone buzzed, not from them, but from a social media notification. My sister, Savannah, had posted a photo. My father in sunglasses, arm around Jackson and Madison, my niece and nephew. All of them standing on a beach in matching Hawaiian shirts, smiling with drinks in their hands. The caption read, "Surprise family trip? So lucky to have the best grandparents in the world." They'd left for Hawaii, with Savannah and her kids, while my daughter, my 8-year-old, was missing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a moment. I just stared at the photo. Then I picked up my phone and made the one call that would end with police pounding on their hotel room door across the Pacific. Before everything unraveled, my life was already complicated, but it was a kind of chaos I had learned to manage. I was 32, an ER nurse at Mercy Hill Hospital in St. Augustine, Florida. My shifts were long, often stretching past midnight, but the work gave me purpose. I had become skilled at guiding strangers through their worst days. I just never saw my own storm coming. Eliza was born 8 years ago, during my final semester of nursing school. Her father, Connor Davis, and I were newly married and completely unprepared. He was still finishing his business degree. We were broke, overwhelmed, and terrified. But when I held Eliza for the first time, none of that mattered. She was mine, a tiny, wriggling miracle with wispy red curls and eyes that never seemed to blink. From that moment on, I promised her everything I had. We tried to make it work. Connor took a job in marketing after graduation and quickly became obsessed with networking events, client dinners, and late-night strategy meetings. I noticed the signs before I was ready to admit them. Perfume on his shirts, missed calls from numbers saved as first names only, a distance in his eyes even when he was home. When I finally confronted him, he didn't lie. He didn't apologize either. He just said he needed more freedom. Our divorce was finalized 3 months later. He got the downtown apartment. I got primary custody and child support that came late more often than not. We settled into a rhythm, Eliza and me. Mornings were chaotic, evenings were sacred. No matter how late my shift ended, I never skipped our bedtime routine. Teeth brushed, story read, and then our brave talk, where we each shared one thing that scared us that day. Hers were usually spiders or spelling tests. Mine were more abstract, missing too much, not being enough, losing her. My parents, Douglas and Irene Rivers, lived just outside town in Palmview. My father had retired from his accounting firm with plenty of savings, and my mother, once a respected school principal, spent most of her time organizing book clubs and brunches. To outsiders, they looked like model grandparents, kind, generous, involved. But inside our family, the picture was never quite that perfect. They had a favorite, always had. Savannah, my younger sister by 4 years, could do no wrong. She'd followed the plan: college, career, perfect wedding to Bradley, a well-paid attorney. She worked part-time as an interior designer and spent most days at home with Jackson and Madison. My parents doted on them like royalty. Birthday gifts, ballet recitals, custom Halloween costumes, surprise weekend getaways. They were showered with attention and affection. Eliza and I, we were tolerated, included out of obligation, never excitement. I told myself it was subtle, that I was overthinking. But even Eliza noticed. One day after Christmas, as we drove home in silence, she asked, "Mom, do Grandma and Grandpa like me the same as the other kids?" My chest tightened. I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect her, but I couldn't say yes. The signs had been there for years, like hairline cracks in a wall I pretended not to see. But once I let myself look, really look, it all became impossible to ignore. When Jackson turned 10, my parents threw him a backyard party with rented inflatables, a magician, and personalized goodie bags. Eliza's birthday had been 2 months earlier. She'd gotten a discount craft set and a half-hearted happy birthday over a dinner none of them attended. When I brought it up, Mom said she must have written the wrong date on the calendar and told me not to be dramatic. The winter recital was another slap. Madison's first ballet performance. My parents drove 3 hours, booked a hotel, and posted photos with captions like, "So proud of our little star." Eliza's piano recital was the following weekend, just 15 minutes from their house. They didn't come. Mom said they'd already RSVP'd to a neighborhood potluck. Even holidays, which were supposed to be joyful, became exercises in quiet survival. The dinner table was always lined with Jackson and Madison's favorite dishes: cheesy potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, homemade brownies. When Eliza developed a gluten sensitivity, I emailed Mom in advance, offered to bring her a separate dish. But on Thanksgiving, everything on the table was drenched in wheat, and Mom just smiled and said, "I'm sure she can find something to eat." Eliza quietly picked at plain lettuce and turkey slices while everyone else devoured rolls and stuffing. She didn't complain, but I watched her smile tighten. I saw her check out. I tried to speak up more than once. "Mom, I've noticed that you seem more involved with Savannah's kids than with Eliza." "Don't be ridiculous," she'd replied, barely looking up from folding a new wardrobe of doll clothes for Madison. "We love all our grandchildren equally. Victoria just makes it easier to be involved. She includes us more." But that wasn't true. I'd sent invitations. I'd shared school calendars. I'd called. I'd begged. The truth was I wasn't Savannah. I hadn't followed their map, hadn't married someone they approved of, hadn't lived in a 2-story house with a matching doormat and seasonal wreaths. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself they cared in their own way, that they were older, tired, overwhelmed, that it wasn't personal, until the week of the accident, until I needed help, not with favors or parties or gifts, but with something simple, with care, with love. 3 nights. That's all I asked. The call came halfway through my 3rd consecutive night shift. My legs ached, my eyes burned, and the trauma, they hadn't been quiet in 12 hours. A 5-car pileup on I-95 had filled every room in the ER. I'd just handed off my last patient when my personal phone vibrated in my pocket. The screen lit up with Eliza's school name, Pine Creek Elementary. At first, I assumed it was a schedule reminder, maybe a field trip notice. But when I answered, the voice on the other end was too serious. "Ms. Rivers, this is Mr. Fry from the front office. We noticed Eliza wasn't in school today, and no one called to excuse her absence. My breath caught. What do you mean? She's with my parents. They should have dropped her off. There was a pause. We haven't seen her this morning. We've tried calling your parents' home number, but there's been no response. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember running. Out of the hospital. Still half in scrubs, my badge flapping against my chest. The 15-minute drive to Palmview felt endless. I called my mom's phone. Straight to voicemail. My dad's? Same. I tried Savannah just in case. No answer. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I knew something was wrong before I even got out of the car. Both vehicles were gone. No porch light. No signs of life. I used my spare key and burst through the front door. Mom? Dad? Eliza? Silence. Then I saw the paper on the kitchen counter. A single sheet lined. My mother's signature penmanship across the top. Natalie, sorry, sweetie, we just couldn't take care of her. We've arranged for temporary placement until you're available again. You can contact Child Protective Services to make arrangements. No number, no location, no signature, just abandonment. My hands trembled as I tried dialing CPS. It took 3 transfers and nearly 20 minutes to reach someone who could even pull up a file. A woman named MS. Beltran, polite but distant, confirmed it. Yes, we have a record of a child named Eliza Rivers being placed in emergency foster care last night. The reported guardians, Douglas and Irene Rivers, requested immediate placement, citing inability to provide care and stating the mother was unavailable indefinitely. Unavailable indefinitely? I repeated, my voice cracking. I'm her mother. I was working 3 night shifts. I told them exactly when I'd be picking her up. I understand this is upsetting, ma'am, Ms. Beltran said gently. But please try to remain calm so we can verify your identity and begin the reunification process. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to drive to whatever office had processed this and demand to know how no one had checked. But instead, I did what every ER nurse is trained to do in a crisis. I breathed. I answered every question. I recited my custody paperwork from memory. I gave them my badge number, my shift reports, Eliza's medical records, her allergy prescriptions, everything. And as the sun rose over Palmview, I sat in my childhood living room, staring at the spot where my parents once kept a family photo on the mantel. It had been replaced by a candle display from Pottery Barn. It took 4 hours of non-stop phone calls, document verifications, and urgent pleas before CPS finally gave me the address. Eliza had been placed with an emergency foster family on the edge of town, people I had never met, who didn't know her, who had no idea she hated orange juice and was afraid of dogs that barked too loud. When I pulled up to the modest yellow ranch house, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The woman who opened the door was in her 50s, kind-eyed and calm. You must be Eliza's mom, she said softly. She's in the backyard with my husband. I stepped onto the back porch, and there she was, my daughter, sitting on a patch of grass, gently tossing a ball toward an old retriever who couldn't care less. Her shoulders were hunched, her curls messy, her eyes vacant. Eliza, I whispered. She turned. The moment her eyes met mine, she dropped the ball and ran. Her body collided with mine so hard I nearly stumbled back. She wrapped her arms around my waist and sobbed into my shirt. Mommy, I thought you weren't coming back. My knees buckled. I dropped to the ground and held her, rocking her back and forth, whispering over and over, I would never leave you. Never. I'm so sorry. I'm here now. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. Eventually, we moved inside where Mrs. Callahan, the foster mother, had prepared juice and snacks. Eliza sat beside me on the couch, clinging to my arm, afraid to let go. As she slowly began to talk, the pieces fell into place. Grandma said you needed to take care of something important, and maybe you'd need a really long break, she whispered. She packed my pajamas and my nightlight. Then they dropped me off at a building and said nice people would look after me. But I didn't want nice people. I wanted you. My throat burned. I squeezed her tighter, brushing her hair away from her flushed cheeks. They had no right to say that. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Mrs. Callahan looked at me, eyes filled with a quiet kind of anger. When they dropped her off, they never mentioned you. Never said you were returning. They presented themselves as her guardians, said they were overwhelmed and didn't know what else to do. They lied, not only to CPS, but to Eliza. Later, while Eliza watched cartoons in the next room, I finally looked at my phone again. A notification blinked at the top of my screen. Savannah had tagged our parents in a photo. There they were on a beach in Maui. My father teaching Jackson how to snorkel. My mother building a sandcastle with Madison. Matching floral shirts. Champagne glasses. Laughter frozen in pixels. The timestamp? 30 minutes after Eliza had been handed over to Child Protective Services. I had always considered myself calm under pressure. Years in the ER had trained me to think clearly when others fell apart. But this wasn't a stranger coding in Trauma Bay 3. This was my daughter, and someone had deliberately endangered her. For a vacation. After getting Eliza settled back at the Callahan's house for the night, her favorite blanket in hand and Webster the stuffed otter tucked beside her, I stepped outside to make a call I never thought I'd need to make. Melissa Grant picked up on the second ring. She was more than my closest friend. She was also one of the sharpest family court attorneys in St. Johns County. And when I told her what had happened, I didn't even have to ask. They did what? Her voice snapped through the phone like a whip. Natalie, that's not just morally repugnant. That's criminal. I want to file a report, I said, pacing the Callahan's porch. Not just with CPS, but with law enforcement. They lied about being Eliza's guardians. They falsified information. They left her. You have every right to, Melissa said. That's child abandonment, filing a false report, and possibly custodial interference. We'll start by documenting everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I created a digital folder on my laptop. I printed screenshots. Savannah's vacation posts with timestamps proving the trip had been pre-planned for weeks. I saved the intake form from CPS, the text messages, the photos of Eliza in the foster home, and even the receipt I'd given my parents listing her allergy meds and emergency contacts. The next morning, I called Detective Harper. I'd worked with him before. He handled family-related cases, and I'd seen him comfort domestic violence victims in the ER more times than I could count. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just listened. Based on what you're describing, he said slowly, there are definitely grounds for a formal investigation. The fact that they left the state complicates jurisdiction, but it doesn't protect them. I told him about the Maui hotel, the matching shirts, the timestamp on Savannah's post. They lied, Harper, I said quietly. They told CPS I was unreachable, that I might not come back, and then they went to the beach. I'll get in touch with authorities in Hawaii, he said, but I'll need an official statement, and everything you've got. He didn't say it, but I could hear it in his tone. This case was different. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was methodical, cold. I looked back through the window, where Eliza now slept curled on the couch, her face finally peaceful. They didn't just lie about me, they tried to erase me. It happened exactly 72 hours after Eliza had been dropped at Child Protective Services. Detective Harper had coordinated with Hawaiian authorities using every scrap of evidence I'd given him. Flight confirmations, Savannah's social media breadcrumbs, hotel reservation details. Everything pointed to one place, the Oceanside Resort and Spa in Wailea, Maui. A 5-star sanctuary with oceanfront suites and an infinity pool that glowed at night. At 7:05 a.m. Hawaiian time, 3 officers from the Maui Police Department knocked firmly on the door of room 742. Security footage would later show the moment the door creaked open. My father, still in a resort bathrobe, hair uncombed. Looked out with confusion that quickly twisted into alarm as Detective Barnes, the local lead, identified himself. Gerald Rivers? Barnes said evenly, "We need to speak with you and Irene Rivers regarding an incident involving your granddaughter, Eliza Rivers, and allegations of child abandonment." My father tried to shut the door. The officers didn't let him. Behind him, my mother appeared, her hair still in rollers, a silk robe cinched too tightly at the waist. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice already trembling. "We made arrangements. We told them she needed care while her mother was unavailable." "You never contacted her mother," Barnes replied, holding up documentation from CPS. "You declared yourselves guardians and omitted critical custody information. Your daughter has since filed formal charges." Then the connecting door burst open. Savannah stepped in, followed by her husband Bradley, both in pajamas. The kids peeked from behind them, confused and silent. "What's going on?" Savannah demanded. "You told me Natalie knew." She turned on them, eyes wide. "You said she approved it." "She would have made a scene," my mother whispered. "You know how she gets dramatic." Even Savannah recoiled at that. Then came the excuses. "She has special needs," my father insisted. "She's difficult, demanding. We weren't equipped." "She's 8," I told Detective Harper later when he relayed the scene. "She needs an inhaler twice a year. That's it." When asked about the vacation, my mother fumbled. "We didn't mean to leave her. We just needed space." "You needed cocktails and a beachfront suite," Harper replied, deadpan. "And you got them, while she slept alone in a stranger's house." Hotel guests began to gather near the elevators, whispering, filming. One couple approached the officers, quietly asking, "Did they really leave their granddaughter just to come here?" "Yes, ma'am," Barnes confirmed. "They did." Savannah stood frozen, watching it unfold. Her perfect vacation unraveling with each passing second. Her voice barely carried over the commotion. "What about Jackson and Madison?" "They're crying. You're ruining everything." The officers calmly escorted my parents from their luxury suite, bypassing the breakfast buffet they'd reserved and the snorkeling lesson they were scheduled for at 10. Back in St. Augustine, I received a short message from Detective Harper. Confirmed contact. Interview completed. Returning to Connecticut under police escort. They weren't handcuffed, but they might as well have been. The internet noticed. One hotel guest had filmed part of the confrontation and uploaded it with the caption, "Grandparents busted for ditching their granddaughter to vacation with their favorites. Family drama goes nuclear in paradise." It was spreading fast, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace. The day Eliza came home, the house didn't feel the same. Her room was still there, exactly as we'd left it, but the innocence had cracked. The pink glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling no longer felt magical. Her nightlight flickered like a warning. Still, she smiled when she saw her pillow, her real one, and when I handed her Webster, the stuffed otter she'd taken everywhere since she was 4. She held him to her chest and whispered, "You came back for me. I never left you," I said softly. "Not even for a second." CPS required a final in-person verification at their office before restoring full custody, but Ms. Beltran fast-tracked the process. "We've reviewed the documentation," she said. "You're cleared to take her home, but we strongly recommend trauma counseling for both of you." I didn't hesitate. By the following week, Eliza began sessions with Dr. Elaine Cho, a child psychologist known for her work with separation trauma. After the first session, Dr. Cho asked to speak with me privately. "Eliza shared something today that concerned me," she said gently. She said her grandparents told her, "Sometimes mommies go away and don't come back. That maybe you were gone because she was too much trouble." Those words, they physically hurt. Not just the meaning, but the intention. The cold, premeditated cruelty it took to plant that idea in a child's mind. Dr. Cho saw the rage rise in my face. She doesn't believe it anymore, she added quickly, but it's important we keep reinforcing that it wasn't her fault. So I did. Every single day. I rearranged my work schedule to part-time, thanks to my supervisor Jennifer, who'd been quietly championing me since the incident. Take whatever time you need, she'd said. Family comes first, especially when they've been hurt. Financially, the change was manageable. Emotionally, it was necessary. We began creating new traditions. Sunday pancake brunches with Kelly, my best friend and fellow nurse, and her daughter Emma. Saturday library trips where Eliza could pick any book, no matter how silly or sparkly. Weekly movie nights with Judith, my ex-mother-in-law, who, unlike my own parents, had never stopped showing up. One night, as we were drawing constellations on a large piece of butcher paper for Eliza's space wall, she looked up and asked, "Are we a small family now?" "No," I replied, placing a sticker star over our heads. "We're just the kind that shines brighter with fewer people." She smiled, wide and certain, and returned to her drawing. No hesitation, no sadness. We were rebuilding from the ground up. But this time, everything we laid down was real, earned, solid, and stitched together, not by obligation, but by love. 3 days after they returned from Hawaii, sunburnt, sullen, and still half in denial, my parents stood in front of a judge in a packed county courtroom. I sat 2 rows behind them, Eliza's small hand wrapped around mine like a lifeline. The judge, Honorable Caroline Reeves, was not the kind to be swayed by tears or tailored suits. Her voice was firm, her posture straighter than a steel rod. "You are charged with child abandonment, filing false statements to a government agency, and custodial interference," she read aloud. "How do you plead?" My parents' lawyer, a longtime acquaintance of my father's, stepped forward with a carefully rehearsed plea deal. 6 months probation, mandatory family counseling, community service at a local children's center. No jail time, no record if completed successfully. I didn't fight the deal, because the punishment I wanted wasn't jail. It was acknowledgement, and that came when the judge turned to my mother. "Mrs. Rivers, would you like to make a statement?" She stood, smoothing the hem of her beige cardigan. "We meant no harm, Your Honor. We thought we were acting in the child's best interest. Natalie can be intense. We didn't want to interrupt her shifts." "Abandoning a child isn't a scheduling conflict," Judge Reeves replied. "It's a betrayal of trust. A child is not a suitcase you drop off when vacation plans come up." My father tried to salvage dignity. "We just didn't think she'd overreact like this." But before the hearing ended, the judge offered Eliza a choice. "If you feel safe, you may speak." She looked at me. I nodded once. Eliza stood, holding a small piece of folded paper in her trembling hands. She took a deep breath. "When you left me, I thought it was because I did something wrong," she said clearly. "I thought maybe I wasn't good enough, or that Mommy didn't want me anymore." My mother began to cry, but Eliza didn't flinch. "I know now that none of it was true, and I'm trying to forgive you, but I need you to know that what you did made me feel invisible, and I never want to feel that way again." Silence filled the courtroom. Even Savannah, sitting in the back, wiped her eyes. It wasn't the apology I had waited for. It was better. It was power reclaimed. Afterward, my mother reached for Eliza. She stepped behind me instead. My father said nothing. In the weeks that followed, the story faded from headlines. The Hawaii grandparents' case was replaced by newer scandals and fresher outrage. But in our home, the change remained. Eliza smiled more, laughed more, danced around the living room again. And one night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "Mom, I'm not scared anymore when you go to work. I know you'll come back." I kissed her forehead and whispered back, "Always." We didn't return to the way things were. We created something better. Family dinners no longer included long drives to Palmview or sitting through awkward silences while Eliza picked at salad. Instead, we gathered around our own table, surrounded by people who had earned their place. Kelly and Emma, Judith, who never missed a movie night, even Mrs. Callahan and her husband stopped by one weekend with a basket of Eliza's favorite muffins. Eliza turned 9 that spring. She wanted a space-themed party, so we transformed the backyard into a galaxy. Silver stars hanging from the trees, a rocket cake, and constellation games. Before blowing out the candles, she looked around at everyone and smiled. "Make a wish, Space Explorer," I whispered. "I already got it," she replied. "We're home." And she was right. Home wasn't a building. It wasn't defined by shared blood or old photo albums. It was wherever we were safe, where we were seen, where love showed up, especially when it was hard. My parents still attended court-mandated therapy. Some visits happened with a supervisor present at Eliza's request. Other days, she chose not to go at all. And that was okay. Her voice mattered now. Her boundaries were sacred. Savannah sent a card once. It said, "I'm sorry. I see things differently now." I didn't respond. Some lessons don't need applause, just space to land. I kept journaling every night, not because I needed proof anymore, but because I wanted Eliza to know one day that I chose her every single time. That no vacation, no judgment, no betrayal could ever change that. She was never too much, and I was never unavailable. We were just surrounded by people who couldn't see us clearly until we stood up and made them. So now I ask you, have you ever had to protect someone you love from your own family? What gave you the strength to choose what was right, even when it meant walking away? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need it more than you know. And if this journey spoke to something inside you, hit like, subscribe, and stay for more stories about strength, survival, and the quiet kind of revenge that rebuilds everything they tried to destroy. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It's a child finally falling asleep, knowing they'll never be left behind again.